Hi, this is Gina with your Kingdom Sewing Minute Clinic. For today's Minute Clinic, I'd like to talk to you about changing your needle position. We'll talk about when you would want to change the needle position and how to do it. So I'm going to start here today with our Janome 1522, really pretty pink machine here. This is a nice mechanical machine. And we'll take a look at the stitches up on the top here. And you can see that we have A and B that are two straight stitches. And if you look at the little oval at the bottom there, you can see A is a center position straight stitch and B is a left position straight stitch. So how do we select those stitches? If we come down and look at our stitch selector dial here, we have A and B, and you'll see that they're at the same position on the dial. So the way that we go from one to the other is we're going to change our stitch width dial, and you'll see here we have a little dot in the center, and here we have a little dot to the left of that oval. So when I bring the dial around to the 0, now my needle's in the left position. And let me show you that actually at the needle. So this is the straight, or the center position, and then when I turn that stitch width dial to 0, you'll see my needle moves over to the left. Now I do have a zipper foot on this machine, and in the left position that needle is going to hit the foot, so we wouldn't want to do that with this particular foot on. But I wanted to show you this because this is one of the times when you may want to be able to move your needle position a little bit. So if I have the needle all the way in the center here, and maybe that needle is going to fall too close to the zipper teeth, I might want to move it over to the left just a little bit like that, and then I can get the needle right where I want it, next to the zipper teeth, or maybe a little further over. Or if I were doing piping, I might want to stitch one row of stitching a little further away and then the next row of stitching a little closer, so I can move that needle around as I need to get the stitching right where I want it. So that's how we would do it on a mechanical machine. Let me show you on a computerized machine. It's a little bit different. So we're going to take a look here at our Baby Lock Presto 2, and on your computerized machines, let me show you on the screen first. Whenever we want to, we are on a straight stitch left position right now. Whenever we want to change the needle position, you can see here it says position underneath. If we change our stitch width or position, we're actually moving the needle. And so we have all of these different positions, 7 being to the far right and 0 being to the far left, with 3.5 being your center position. So let me show you that so you can see the needle moving. I'll put my fabric under there to make it a little bit easier for you to see. So you can see how we can move the needle along here. Now why else would I want to move the needle? If I weren't sewing a zipper or piping, maybe I was doing some understitching. And sometimes I like to actually line my seam up just inside the foot, or maybe to the outside left edge of the foot. And then I can move my needle all the way over to the left. And now when I sew down, I can keep my fabric or my seam lined up over here. I can get closer to the seam and I have something to line up on with my needle to the far left there. Another time you might want to do that is if you were doing some top stitching. And I'm going to start with my needle all the way to the right side. And you'll see here, say I was doing like something like you'd find on a pair of jeans. I'm going to stitch down the right side, and I'm lining my fabric up, the seam of my fabric right here. And I'm going to stitch down the first row with my needle all the way to the right. And then I'm going to go back, and I want to be able to line my fabric up in the same spot because that's an easy place for me to follow. And now I'll move my needle all the way over to the left and do my second row of stitching. And I can still follow that same spot or use that same spot on my foot as a guide rather than having to move my fabric over and maybe not having anything to line up with. So if I had just left my needle in the center and I would be sewing the first time like this, I don't really have anything that I can line my fabric up with. And then if I move it over to do the second row on the left, here maybe I could line up. So being able to move your needle around is just going to make it easier for you to find a spot where you can line up your fabric however you like there and just move the needle instead of the fabric. Another place where this works really well is if you're doing some edge stitching. So here I've sewn a seam here and I'm folding this over like maybe I'm stitching the edge of a collar or a cuff or the top of a bag or something, and I've got that seam pressed under. So now again, if I line my fabric up with the edge of my foot here, I can move my needle all the way over to that right side, and that gives me something to line up with again, because remember, if my needle was in the center, we could have trouble because I wouldn't be using as much of the feet system here. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we put the needle back to the center, and then I'm trying to stitch along the edge of my fabric, you know, I'm only using part of the feet teeth here. And if your needle defaults to the left and you were trying to do edge stitching, now I'm using even less of the feet system, and what's going to happen is it's going to be really hard to keep this going straight, really hard to control it. So better if I move it all the way over here and then move my needle all the way to the other side. It's just going to be that much easier to sew it. So now that you know how to move your needle position, give it a try. This has been your Kingdom Sewing Minute Clinic.